It's hard to stay mad with them. This rare generational French team might be amongst the most likeable sides Test rugby has ever produced, and this Friday night they kept that ticking along as they kicked off their bid for Six Nations glory by putting paid to Pays de Galles. Les Bleu delivering a performance big on style, shrugging on substance, condemning Cymru to a 13th successive Test match defeat. So how did France get off to a flying start? What is wrong with Wales in this match in particular, because we don't have time to get into it in full, and how does this set up both France for their title chase and Jack Morgan's backing band for the likely wooden spoon decider next weekend in Rome? Friday nights was a weird game to quantify. Wales and France probably both played at similar levels relative to their team's current ceiling, just 2025 Wales at a 7 out of 10 is 43 points worse than 2025 France at a 7 out of 10. Even last year, with France off song and Wales putting in almost certainly the best performance of this World Cup cycle so far for them, the margin was 21. And as such, talking about this game in what is supposed to be rugby's most even-handed, unpredictable tournament becomes a pretty unique and difficult experience. The gap just feels so wide. Wales essentially wanted to shut the game down and play old-school Warren ball. And in many ways, they did it pretty well. This opening passage is kind of excellent. Thomas sends it long from the kickoff, wanting a chance to counter, but Antoine Dupont being Antoine Dupont, he gets 60 metres on the kick and Wales are forced to start from their own half. But Owen Watkin crosses the gain line on first carry, and Ireland style, Wales bounce back the way it came, allowing the forwards who hit that last ruck to involve themselves again, keeping everybody involved and in the game. It creates really good numbers and as such catches France short on the far side, the utterly exceptional Jack Morgan making a half break. However, the following phase, Wales look to pull the same trick off 10, and it's just kind of shit. Ben Thomas, not a fly half by trade, takes the ball static and just invites the French defence up in their face. Owen Watkin has arranged the next phase on the far side, but the team now going backwards, it's easy for the French defenders to swarm them, and the move Watkin arranged to capitalise on forward momentum is no longer on. Dupont making a brilliant read to catch Cymru behind the gain line. However, Wales don't panic, they stop, set and reboot via the boot. Tom Rogers beats Ramos in the air, and as the ball is taken in, Watkin spots how slow Ramos is to get back in position and goes to put for a kick that's absolutely on to keep Wales on the front foot in control of territory, except it ricochets off French leg and Ramos steps up and puts in a 50-22. This was Cymru's night in a nutshell. Lots of effort, some really good bits of execution, but ultimately this was a side of pretty good players playing a limited game plan built to contain an opposition who are truly exceptional. France touched the ball twice in these opening 2 minutes, and in those touches, Dupont and then Ramos make 10 times the yardage Wales could in 9 phases of play and control the possession. Because here's the thing, Wales can spend as much time as they like containing the human members of this French team. Ultimately, Antoine et al. Will just chew through the bars and break out of that cage. France's opening try, finished by Teo Atasogbe, is probably the finest example of the match. It begins with 2 brilliant defensive interventions by France. First, in, unironically, one of the best try-scoring opportunities Wales created all game, possibly the best, Dupont reading the play and prompting Nick Tompkins to pull hands so shitty I hope he washed them at half-time. This almost leads to a try, but even after Wales recover the ball and Botham sets a really solid platform, Miafi makes a brilliant little intervention here. The ref has told him to leave the ball, but right as Williams looks to deliver it back to his 10, he springs back up into the ruck and knocks the scrum off shoulder. He slips, the ball is out, and hence has to hurry the pass, and it allows Dupont so much time to get up in Ben Thomas's face. Williams does extremely well from the resulting ruck, but is still given France a prime attacking opportunity on the 22. They get off to an immediate flyer. I discussed in our preview how good Dupont is at getting his team on the front foot, and this is a prime example. First phase, defenders' eyes are on him, so he just hits up the carry straight away, but the next phase, Watkin here is eyeing up those options in front of him, so Dupont picks and goes himself, prompting Watkin to turn his head, allowing Barassi to explode onto the centre's outside. Frankly, the only way to win is doing exactly what Wales do next phase. Raffles challenge, forcing Dupont into the ruck, but Untermack jogs in to run the show until he's back up to his feet. Once again, a pick and go for a bit of momentum before hitting it up immediately. Ben Thomas's eyes here are always on Dupont as he crabs out, and so the quick pass allows him and Barassi to exploit it, the centre hitting another excellent line, dragged down just short by Liam Williams. Grove's pick and go gets him over the line, but for a brilliant intervention by Thomas, Botham and Jack Morgan here, whose hand wraps around the ball and almost traps it in in over the line, so nearly winning Wales a goal line dropout. However, it rolls loose, and knowing the turnover's coming, Dupont flicks it up, allowing Ramos to get it wide. Jack Morgan, somehow back on his feet, makes a miracle tackle on Bielbarré, not only stopping him, but rolling him straight into the path of Tompkins to attempt the jackal. This changes the entire momentum of the attack. The ball is suddenly slow as France have had to clear out 2 jackal options, and Wales get on top 3 phases in a row, knocking them back behind the gain line. This is the game plan Wales came to play, containing France for enormous effort, huge line speed, and most of all, having a Jack Morgan. Except France aren't like the other girls. Unfazed by Wales knocking them behind the gain line, Dupont takes a step back voluntarily. At this stage, right, I think this is a conscious part of France's game. Yes, these 3 forwards are carrying options, but they also act as blockers between the tacklers and Dupont, buying him an extra split second on the ball whenever he decides to do this thing that he does. And by this thing that he does, I mean something that's literally totally undefendable and almost game-breakingly good. Much like his absurd 50-22 in the Champions Cup final, the defence here is perfectly well set. This isn't an error by Wales, there's no defensive lapse. Josh Adams is one of the best positional wingers in the game, and this is grand by him. He's fine, but Dupont just outfoxes all. Initially, back watching the cross kick, every half second Toto holds on, Adams just advances a step, knowing the wrist wide ball becomes more likely. And at the exact split second that Adams has advanced too far to turn in time, but before he's crabbed or held onto the ball too long for the defence to get up in his face, Dupont drops it on the toe. This kick is perfect. I can't overstate that enough. If there's half a second more hang time on this, Adams bundles Adesogbe into touch. If there's half a second less, it bounces first and becomes a free-for-all. If this ball is 1 metre more in either direction, one of Wales' 2 best defenders, Josh Adams on the touchline, gets to Adesogbe. But no. Because we're so used to seeing him do this, it's easy to take for granted what an insane piece of skill this is. Dupont's margin for error on this kick is about 6 inches, that's 15 centimetres or 2 Haskells, and his window of opportunity about 0.8 of a second, that's 1/20 of a Haskell, and it's brilliantly finished by Adesogbe, but Dupont's involvement is just, I want to use that word again, undefendable, and hence renders any attempt to contain the team pointless. And we saw it again on the winger's second score. This comes off a Welsh clearance out the 22, as Tompkins and Thomas have to scramble a little to get beep to floor. Aldrit clears well beyond the ruck, and Tommy Reffel makes a terrible decision. He played for Wales instead of England. No, this breakdown is won by France. Barassi is over the ball, but instead of bouncing round to the open side, Reffel decides to enter anyway. This gives Groh license to clear him out, and the prop just clings to his leg. He was part of the ruck, so he's perfectly within his rights to do this. Jenkins is left way too much ground to cover, with Rowlands pretty far out and Reffel unable to fold round. As the flanker remains trapped, Aldrit just stands his ground right in Jenkins' way, preventing the lock from even attempting to close the gap. Dupont scoots through this gap artificially formed, and from there, there's obviously no stopping him. He makes the step, and he'd probably have gone on to score himself, but flicks it backwards out the hand to Adesogbe, who jogs it in for his 4th try in as many caps. When Antoine has the ball, or is anywhere near it, literally every option is on the table at all times. You can't defend him. Tom Rogers' positioning here is frankly pretty good. He's on his own in a 2v1, waiting for Williams to fill in, so he marks the easy pass, knowing he can hit Undermac and shut it down if they go through the hands. Most scrum halves, even if they do throw the long ball, it's in the air long enough that he can cover it. But every pass is of equal ease to Antoine, who delivers it perfectly, and lets Beep do the simple step through Mr. Rogers' neighbourhood to score. And if you dare take your eye off him, which so often the excellence of his other teammates force you to do, it can be job done. This scrum highlights an interesting quirk of the new law preventing scrum halves putting pressure on at the base of their opposite number. The scrum now has to be behind their side of the tunnel. Dupont can just full on float off and play fly half with Aldrit at 9, something much less possible previously when Williams could have disrupted the pass. Dupont takes a few steps, but once he gives the pass, Tompkins fails to think that France might want to get the best player in the world back on the ball, and only notices his loop absolute last second, trying to turn as he makes contact with Moafana, leading to the centre slipping over, opening huge space for Antoine to fix Adams and put Adesogbe down the extreme. Ben Thomas makes a brilliant tackle. Adesogbe just lobs it backwards to prevent going into touch. Tom Ramos does the sickest thing you've ever seen in your life before looping around and taking it into contact himself. Wales contain France then pretty well over the next few phases, pretty much entirely neutral on the gain line, just fine, until we get to a prime example of why you can't put all your emphasis on Antoine. Nothing is really set here for France. Ramos is barely in the boot, Bielbarré is just looping around, and Untermac is on the far side of the ruck. Nothing here is really saying to defensive leader in this situation, Tompkins, it's panic stations. Except for the fact, of course, that Uni Antonio is massive. Preparing himself for a hashtag alpha test copyright Sam Warburton 2006 all rights reserved, or more likely a hospital visit, Tompkins is late to reach Untermac, and this gives Ben Thomas a decision to make. Does he shoot up and make a risky individual read, or does he do the sensible system thing and stay connected to his teammate? Thomas decides to trust Tompkins, which I guess someone has to do, and it allows Untermac to give a glorious ball. Seriously, this pass is so good. Nowhere near enough people are talking about it. The way he presses it immediately, drifted in front of Ramos for such speed without being a bullet, into the space rather than to the man, not just allowing but forcing Ramos to get onto Thomas's outside. Adams is then left in no man's land by his inside defenders, and King Bullshit can put beep beep over for the score. It's Roman Untermac in a nutshell, man. The way he forces his teammates into space, it's just brilliant. Wales came out with a plan to contain France, and for a collective maybe 65 of the 80 minutes, they did a pretty good job. But the problem is, containing this French team is broadly impossible. Not only do they have one of the best attacks in the world, not only do they have one of the biggest packs in the game, able to generate so much go-forward momentum and ball in any neutral moment of the match, they also have Untermac, Ramos, Dupont, Bilberry and Aldrit, all players capable of turning, say, a good Welsh attack into a 50-22 and a 70-metre net gain, or a moment of fantastic defence into an instant 7 points. They're game breakers, bullshit players, because this became the ultimate question for Wales. The effort levels on Friday night were pretty immense. Captain Jack Morgan in particular was unbelievable. For me, pound for pound, up there with Dupont and James Lowe as the best player of the opening round of the Six Nations. He was simply everywhere. More tackles than anyone else on the pitch. He made more carries than any other Welsh forward in a Six Nations match for 15 years, and those stats don't even count stuff like this kick chase or the countless rucks he hit and slowed down. The players gave all they have on Friday night, but their effort was being pounded into a strategy that was exposed as fundamentally flawed the second Dupont dropped it onto a dime in the 17th minute. Wales' attack is very poor. There was scarcely a moment where they looked like scoring over the full 80 minutes. Dan Edwards looked incredibly composed for first cap and added some lovely zip to a few carries off 10, but the system just feels so predictable. This was ostensibly Rob Howley's first game back as the primary attack coach, so maybe you can give him some leeway and, some time to bed the system in, but the system we did see is just really quite predictable. Because the problem for Wales is not what they're actually doing with the ball, but what the players without it are doing at that same time. Wales' running off the ball on Friday night was atrocious. So far below this standard. We're looking at like Nat 1 level perhaps. Edwards here calls a very good shape. It's a really good move pulled on the fly by 21-year-old fly half with a split second's notice. This could, if well run, create a try. But watch all the players who don't touch the ball. Freddie Thomas here offers nothing. No threat to the fence whatsoever. He's in no man's land, running nothing. No line whatsoever. Will Rowlands doesn't even put his hands up here. Not looking like he's interested in the ball. It's just lazy. And then Raffel overruns it. The opposite problem, meaning Moafana here, the French defender, can just push off 3 times and make the tackle on Tompkins. Never once committed, shutting down the space single-handedly. If Rowlands just sells himself a little bit, just, looking like he's interested in playing international rugby, then perhaps carries on and maybe bumps into Moafana, something Ireland's forwards are so good at doing in particular, just taking that player out of the game, committing to that line so hard. Moafana is out the game. He can't drift across, and Ben Thomas is hence able to fix Barassi here with Raffel, Tompkins, and potentially his namesake Freddie all running off him. Tompkins then given a second longer to tie Patasogbe and put Blair Murray down the wing, with Raffel and Thomas Williams here running support. And yet, Wales' dummy runners are the worst of any major side in pro rugby, and at the highest level, that's what makes the difference, the tiny bits in your attack, which, right here, allow France to just eat it up, no problem. It's hard to say without being a professional coach whether this is something you can fix in a week or would require a lifetime to retrain basic instincts for so many of these players, but Warren Gatland will need it to be the former. Next weekend's game against Italy in Rome is an utter must win. Wales will likely be able to contain them much better than France if they do stick to the same tactics, but to make the most obvious statement you'll hear this side of Steve Borthwick starting a podcast, if they're going to win next week, they're going to need to score some points. We are in an era of rugby where D is at the bottom of the eternal triangle wrestle between attack, defence and kicking, and if Wales want to avoid the wooden spoon, and perhaps more importantly, avoid being remembered as the generation who caused a rugby nation to sink into apathy, they're going to need to sort out their running off the ball and add a little bit of sharpness with the ball in hand. France, meanwhile, move on to England, the Twickenham Stadium, in Allianz, West London, knowing if they're to overcome the defence that held Ireland prisoner for so much of that match on Saturday, they may need to go up a few gears from Friday night's performance and prove 3 years since they last took the title that there's much more to them than just being the casual fans' favourites. Thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. This is the start of the Six Nations for 2025. We will have Ireland v England coming up in a few days' time on this very channel. And then on our second channel, More Squid Rugby,
we're going to talk about Scotland v France. And no, that's not because we hate Scotland. It's just because this game happened on the Friday night. We thought we might as well look at that early. And then actually the Ireland-England game was a massive banger. All of them were kind of bangers in a way.
All of them, yeah. No disappointing games this weekend, unless you're a Welsh fan, which we are.
Yes. So they're both coming up soon. Very excited to get into a pair of those. And then there's going to be a whole rest of the Six Nations. And we might talk a little bit about the Rugby World Championship.
We're hoping to get some of the Rugby World Championship on this week as well. So that's potentially to come. There's going to be loads of stuff. So please have a look round. And we'll see you then for more
Rugby Values. This guy's the Rugby Values man. Say hello to the Rugby Values man.
What was the key today?
The key was to play as a team